Have you ever noticed how toxic people do not simply attack you with words, but with something far sharper? Your silence, your patience, your very willingness to give them the benefit of the doubt? They thrive not because they are strong, but because they know how to twist your kindness into weakness. And yet, the most dangerous illusion they spread is this: that you are powerless against them, that your only choices are to fight on their terms, or to collapse under the weight of their manipulation. But what if the truth is far more ruthless, far more liberating? What if the real power lies not in defending yourself endlessly, but in denying them the very battlefield they demand? Machiavelli once observed that the greatest form of strength is control, not of others, but of yourself. So ask yourself right now, who rules your inner kingdom, them or you? Most people wander through life with the belief that toxic individuals can be disarmed by kindness, by reason, or by a patience so long-suffering that eventually the other side will be forced to acknowledge it. This belief is comforting because it suggests that if you simply keep giving, the storm will pass, the venom will exhaust itself, and the cruelty will eventually reveal its own futility. But this is a dangerous illusion. Machiavelli himself observed that those who rely only on goodness in a world of wolves are bound to be destroyed. Toxic people are not searching for harmony, nor are they interested in resolution. Their purpose is to establish control through destabilization. They thrive not when you stand strong, but when you are caught between defense and doubt, explaining yourself endlessly in hopes of clarity. Every explanation you offer is fuel for their next attack. They know that kindness can be twisted into naivety and patience into weakness, and so they stretch every boundary until you begin to wonder if the fault lies with you. This is the very stage they construct, a battlefield where your very virtues are turned into weapons against you. What most fail to understand is that toxic individuals are not truly stronger, nor are they inherently more intelligent. They are opportunists of the human psyche. They have learned, often through their own scars, that the surest way to win is not to build but to manipulate, not to argue with truth but to bend perception. They pull emotional levers like a puppeteer, testing where your reactions rise most sharply, then pressing again and again until they create a pattern. In that pattern, they establish dominance. The misconception is to think of this as power. In truth, it is a dependency on your willingness to engage. They thrive only in interaction. Without your reaction, their strings fall slack, their stage collapses. But because society often teaches us to be good, to seek fairness, to justify ourselves, we walk willingly onto their stage, believing that if we explain enough, if we endure enough, the curtain will close. Yet for them, the curtain never closes. Because as long as you are performing, they are applauding their own victory. Consider how their tactics unfold. A toxic person does not simply insult, they insinuate. They create doubts so subtle that you replay them in the silence of your own thoughts. Was that a joke or a jab? Were they criticizing you or just being honest? This ambiguity is their weapon, because it forces you into the exhausting role of interpreter. Instead of standing in your own certainty, you begin to analyze every tone, every glance, every word, as if their approval were the standard of truth. This is why Machiavelli described manipulation as a form of governance. It is not about force, but about directing perception. A ruler who can shape what others believe need never wield the sword. Toxic people function the same way. They plant seeds in your mind, seeds that grow into questions. Am I too sensitive? Am I overreacting? Could it be that they're right? The cruel irony is that the more you ask these questions, the deeper their roots burrow into your sense of self. The conflict becomes clearer when you realize that their victory is not measured by facts, but by your attention. They do not need to win an argument with logic, because they have already won the moment you shift your energy toward them. Every minute spent explaining, defending, or doubting is a minute that nourishes their position. Like parasites, they do not generate strength on their own. They survive by extracting it from you. And yet, because their victories are invisible, you rarely see the damage until it accumulates. You think you are working things out, but in reality you are being worked down. This is the trap Machiavelli warned of when he noted that battles are not always fought on open fields, but often in the unseen terrains of influence. Toxic people fight in shadows, and their shadows stretch as far as you allow them to. The more light of your energy you give, the longer the shadow becomes. Even more insidious is the cultural conditioning that convinces you silence or withdrawal is weakness. We are taught from childhood to respond when questioned, to justify when accused, to stay calm when provoked. Toxic people exploit this conditioning with surgical precision. They know that if they throw a stone, your instinct will be to explain why you did not deserve it. But explanation is the leash, and each word you utter becomes the chain around your neck. They know this, and so they provoke not because they seek truth, but because they seek the performance of your reaction. When Machiavelli spoke of the art of war, he often emphasized that the most efficient battle is the one that drains your enemy without direct confrontation. That is precisely what toxic individuals achieve. They drain your mind by making you believe you are still in control, while in truth, you are dancing to their rhythm. It is crucial to see that the misconception of their strength is rooted in illusion. They are not powerful by themselves. They are powerful only because they exploit the weaknesses you have not yet faced within. If you fear abandonment, they will threaten distance. If you crave approval, they will withhold recognition. If you value peace, they will stir conflict. They mirror your vulnerabilities back at you, not to expose them for healing, but to weaponize them against you. Yet paradoxically, this is why their so-called power is also their greatest weakness. Because if you confront the root within yourself, your fear of rejection, your hunger for validation, your aversion to conflict, they lose their grip. Their hooks cannot catch on stone. They need soft spots, unhealed wounds. This is why the battle is never truly with them, but with the parts of yourself that still respond to their manipulations. To see this is to see through the illusion of their strength. And so the cycle persists, not because they are undefeatable, but because you unknowingly allow the game to continue. Each time you explain, they recalibrate. Each time you defend, they sharpen. Each time you seek fairness, they remind you fairness is not their language. The misconception that they can be swayed by reason, softened by kindness, or transformed by patience keeps you locked in the theater of their control. But understand this. Parasites die when the host stops feeding them. The same truth applies here. The conflict is not resolved by louder words or sharper comebacks, but by the brutal discipline of disengagement. It feels unnatural at first because it defies the conditioning of a lifetime. Yet once you see it clearly, the truth is undeniable. Toxic people hold no true strength, only borrowed strength, and the moment you stop supplying it, their empire crumbles. Think back to the last time someone's words pierced you deeper than you expected. Not the obvious insults you could shrug off, but the subtle ones, the quiet dismissals, the disguised mockery. You carried those words like an echo long after the moment had passed. Perhaps you lay awake at night replaying the tone, dissecting each syllable, wondering why it cut so sharply. This is the emotional toll of dealing with toxic people. The damage is rarely immediate. It lingers in the silence of your own reflection. And yet, while you wrestled with the meaning, they carried on as if nothing happened. They slept peacefully while you twisted in doubt. That is the cruel brilliance of their method. They do not need to fight you in the open when they can live rent-free in your mind. Their real attack begins not with what they say, but with what you allow yourself to repeat. The realization is devastating. You are often battling shadows they left behind, and in doing so you continue the war long after they have abandoned the field. At first it feels natural to believe that rehearsing these moments in your mind is preparation for the future. You think that if you replay the conversation enough times, you will be ready the next time they strike. But the truth is, replaying is not preparation, it is imprisonment. You relive a wound so many times that it becomes a scar etched into your self-confuge. You may tell yourself, next time I'll have the perfect response. Yet that imagined confrontation never arrives. Instead, the replay weakens you, because you spend your energy crafting a speech for a ghost who is no longer listening. This is why toxic individuals win long after the argument has ended. They do not need to say another word, because your own mind has become their stage. The realization arrives slowly, like a whisper. Every second spent trying to make sense of them is a second stolen from your own clarity, your own peace. They win not through force, but through the way they colonize your thoughts. And then comes the moment when you notice the imbalance clearly. You realize that while you are haunted, they are untouched. You still feel your heart race, your stomach knot, your chest tighten when recalling their words, yet they have likely forgotten the entire exchange. This asymmetry is the cruelest part of the game. You carry the burden of both participants, their cruelty and your reaction, while they walk away lighter, unscathed. It is in that contrast that the truth begins to dawn. Toxic people thrive not in the heat of confrontation but in the aftermath, when you replay what has already ended. You are the one keeping the conflict alive, feeding it with energy, giving their words permanence by attaching them to your identity. And so the realization takes shape. Your suffering is not merely from what they did to you, but from what you continue to do to yourself in the echo of their absence. This is where the silent chains tighten most. There comes a point when you cannot avoid the deeper question. Why do you feel the need to answer them at all? Why do you crave that perfect defense, that irrefutable response that would finally silence their accusations? The realization is sobering. You never owed them an explanation in the first place. You never had to play on the stage they built for you. But somewhere deep inside, the child in you still longs to be understood, still longs for fairness, still longs for recognition. Toxic people sense this longing, and they exploit it. They know you will return again and again to prove yourself, to clear your name, to win back a sense of dignity. And yet, they never intend to grant you that closure. The realization strikes like cold water. You have been offering explanations to those who were never listening, fighting for fairness from those who profit by denying it. In that moment, you begin to see that what you owe is not to them, but to yourself. Peace without permission, dignity without validation. The transformation begins when you finally step outside the endless cycle and observe it for what it is. You notice that the more you explain, the less they hear. The more you fight for fairness, the more unfair the game becomes. It is like wrestling in quicksand. The harder you struggle, the deeper you sink. This is the moment you stop asking, how do I win against them, and instead ask, why am I still playing? That question alone can shatter the illusion. Because the truth is, the only reason their words hold weight is because you have been carrying them, watering them, feeding them with attention. The realization feels heavy at first because it shows you how complicit you've been in your own suffering, but it is also liberating because it reveals the exit. The exit is not a sharper tongue or a stronger argument. It is indifference. The toxic person cannot survive indifference. They live on reaction, and the second you withhold it, their power begins to evaporate. Yet indifference is not numbness. It is not about burying your pain or pretending you don't care. It is about recognizing that your energy is too precious to be wasted on proving yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. It is about reclaiming the throne of your inner world, realizing that the real victory was never about silencing them, but about silencing the voice inside you that begged for their validation. This is the deeper emotional realization. Your peace does not come from winning arguments, but from withdrawing from them entirely. And as soon as you stop rehearsing those ghostly dialogues, stop reliving their insults, stop renting out space in your head, you begin to feel the quiet return of something sacred, your freedom. For the first time, the echoes begin to fade, and in the silence that follows, you hear something more powerful than any comeback, your own strength. And so, the emotional realization reaches its sharpest edge. Toxic people do not destroy you with what they say, but with what you keep repeating to yourself. Their cruelty is the spark, but your memory becomes the wildfire. And just as you have been unknowingly feeding that fire, you also hold the power to extinguish it. By refusing to engage, by refusing to relive, by refusing to carry their poison as if it were your truth, you cut the cycle where it lives, in your mind. And though it may feel like surrender, it is actually the most ruthless form of victory. Because the moment you stop caring to answer, defend, or explain, their shadow collapses. The empire they built inside your head dissolves into dust. The realization is both brutal and beautiful. You never needed them to understand you. You only needed to understand yourself. There comes a time when you finally feel the weight of every battle you've fought, every word you've wasted, every sleepless night you've endured, and you realize that the fight itself has never truly been with them. It has always been within you, between the part of you desperate to be understood and the part of you tired of begging for peace. The awakening begins quietly, not in triumph, but in exhaustion. It is the kind of exhaustion that teaches you the value of silence, the kind that whispers, enough. You look at the scars carved into your soul and notice something you never saw before. They have not weakened you. They have hardened you into something unbreakable. And in that stillness, you begin to grasp a truth Machiavelli himself would have recognized. True power is not in striking back, but in denying the battlefield altogether. You feel for the first time that the fortress of your mind belongs to you, and no voice, no insult, no manipulation has the authority to breach its gates without your permission. When you begin to see your inner world as a fortress, everything changes. Toxic people will always circle the walls, shouting from outside, desperate for you to open the gates. They rely on your fear of isolation, your discomfort with silence, your instinct to defend yourself, because it is in those moments of reaction that they slip through. But when you finally refuse to answer, when you finally learn that silence is not weakness but armor, their voices lose all power. The awakening is not about shouting louder. It is about realizing you no longer need to shout at all. It is a strange kind of liberation, because the urge to retaliate still lives inside you, but you resist it, not because you cannot fight, but because you now know the fight itself is beneath you. Their words echo against stone walls, and stone does not bleed. In solitude, you discover that the silence you once feared is not empty, it is sacred. It is in solitude that you hear your own thoughts without interruption, your own desires without distortion. What once felt like loneliness now feels like clarity. A space where no one else's voice can drown out your own. You begin to see that the greatest victories are invisible, the moment you walk away without explaining. The moment you smile instead of reacting, the moment you let their anger dissolve into the air like smoke. These small acts of refusal are not passive. They are the most active declaration of sovereignty you can make. And though no one applauds these moments, you feel the quiet pride of someone who has reclaimed their throne. This is what awakening feels like. Not fireworks, but a candle flame that refuses to be extinguished, glowing steadily in the dark. Your scars no longer shame you, they guide you. Each wound becomes a map of what you have endured, a reminder that you have survived storms designed to break you. Toxic people hoped your scars would remind you of pain, but instead they remind you of resilience. You look at yourself and realize that if their words were truly powerful, you would not still be standing. But you are standing, and not only standing, you are stronger, quieter, and sharper than before. You see the futility of their attacks now, because you see yourself as unshakable. Scars teach you that you can be hurt but not destroyed, cut but not conquered. The awakening is this: you no longer measure yourself by their cruelty, but by your own ability to rise. And the higher you rise, the smaller they seem, until their voices no longer reach you at all. There is a kind of beauty in indifference that few understand. To walk away without anger, to respond with silence instead of venom, to no longer crave recognition or apology. This is the kind of beauty only born from awakening. Indifference is not emptiness, it is fullness. It is the fullness of knowing your worth does not hinge on anyone's approval. The fullness of knowing your peace cannot be stolen unless you hand it away. When you finally embody this truth, you notice something remarkable. The same people who once thrived on your reactions now stumble in confusion when faced with your calm. Their power depended entirely on your willingness to break. When you refuse to bend, their strategies collapse. What once felt brutal now feels serene. You are not punishing them. You are simply protecting yourself. And that quiet protection becomes the most devastating response of all. You learn to embrace silence as a weapon sharper than words, not the silence of repression, but the silence of strength. Toxic people cannot interpret it. They crave noise, drama, reaction, conflict. Your silence becomes unbearable to them because it starves them of oxygen, and in that starvation you see their desperation exposed. Suddenly the game is revealed for what it always was. They were never in control, only feeding on the control you surrendered. The awakening is this moment of clarity, when you realize you hold the switch that turns off their entire performance. You flick it off, not with rage, not with revenge, but with the simple, devastating act of not caring. And as the stage darkens, you understand that indifference is not the absence of love, but the presence of self-love, strong enough to walk away. Finally, in the stillness after the storm, you awaken to a truth deeper than strategy, deeper than survival. You are not defined by what they did to you. You are defined by what you chose to do with it. You chose to transform your pain into armor, your scars into wisdom, your silence into a throne. You chose to protect your mind as if it were a kingdom, and in doing so, you discovered sovereignty. You are the silent mind, as if it were a kingdom. And in doing so, you discovered sovereignty. The awakening is not about becoming untouchable in the eyes of the world, but about becoming untouchable in the eyes of your own doubts. It is the light that reveals you never needed to destroy them. You only needed to stop letting them destroy you, and once that realization settles into your bones, you walk through life differently. Lighter, freer, yet heavier with a kind of strength no one can ever take away. And so the journey comes full circle, not with the sound of triumph over others, but with the silence of triumph over yourself. You realize now that the real revolution was never about tearing down toxic people or forcing them to see your worth. It was about ending the war inside your own mind. For so long you believed peace would arise when they changed, when they apologized, when they finally understood the damage they caused. But awakening has shown you that waiting for them was another form of surrender. You no longer wait. You no longer beg. You no longer bend. Instead, you draw your strength from within, from the unshakable truth that your value does not rest in their hands. The brutal tactics are not loud. They are not dramatic. They are quiet, calculated acts of reclaiming your own life, walking away, refusing to explain, protecting your energy, guarding your silence. This is not weakness. This is sovereignty. And sovereignty feels different. It is not about ruling others. It is about ruling yourself with such certainty that no one can ever dethrone you again. The final reflection is clear and sharp. Toxic people collapse not when you destroy them, but when you stop allowing them to matter. Their power was always borrowed, and you have cut off the supply. Now, you move forward not with anger but with clarity, not with revenge but with peace. Your scars remind you of battles survived, but they no longer define you. They guide you toward deeper strength. The call to action does not roar. It whispers to guard your peace like a treasure, to protect your mind like a kingdom, to choose your silence like a sword. It whispers to live in a way that no one, no insult, no manipulation can rule your spirit. The most brutal tactic of all is indifference, because indifference leaves them powerless and you free. And in that freedom you discover something extraordinary. The only throne that ever mattered was the one inside you. Guard it, rule it, and let no one ever again take it from you.